Here's a puzzle to start your day. Three of the biggest companies on Earth just did something almost unheard of. They sold out their entire product line, not for this quarter, not for this year, but all the way through the end of 2027. Every unit spoken for. And the CEO of one of them says next year will be, in his words, the worst supply shortage in the industry's history, which, if you're selling the thing everyone's short on, is fantastic news. So their stocks must be soaring, right? Wrong. They crashed, down about 30%, into bear market territory, wiping out over $1 trillion. Today, I want to figure out how we sold everything and can't make enough becomes sell the stock, because that paradox tells you almost everything about the mood of this market. Let me lay out the facts, because they're genuinely striking. The companies are the world's three great memory chip makers, America's Micron and South Korea's SK Hynix and Samsung. Memory chips, DRAM, and the fancier high-bandwidth memory called HBM are the stuff that makes AI possible. Every AI data center NVIDIA and everyone else is building needs staggering amounts of this memory, and demand has been so ferocious that, according to reporting compiled by MarketWise, these three have sold out their entire DRAM and high-bandwidth memory output, not just for the rest of this year, but through all of 2027. Micron's CEO, Sanjay Mehrotra, said earlier this year the company could only supply its key customers roughly half to two-thirds of what they were asking for. And SK Hynix's CEO told Reuters that 2027 will likely be the worst year in the industry's history from a supply perspective, meaning demand will so wildly outstrip supply that they literally cannot make enough. On the earnings, it's the same story. Samsung reported operating profit around $59 billion, a monster number. SK Hynix posted record quarterly profit and revenue. Micron's revenue in a recent quarter was up over 300% year over year. By every fundamental measure a business school textbook would hand you. Revenue, profit. Backlog, demand. These companies are printing money and turning customers away. And here's what the stocks did. Micron fell from an all-time closing high of about $1,213 in late June to around $829 by early August, a nearly 32% drop. Samsung fell roughly 33% in the same window. SK Hynix, since going public, dropped around 15%. Zoom out and the numbers get staggering. According to Yahoo Finance's tracking, the broader semiconductor group shed roughly $1.5 trillion in market value from late June, with Micron alone accounting for nearly $350 billion of that. $1.5 trillion evaporated from the companies powering the single hottest technology on the planet, while those companies were sold out and setting profit records. So how? How do you square sold out through 2027 with down 30%? And this is where I want to be critical, because the answer is not comforting, and the easy explanations are wrong. Let me walk through what's actually going on. Because there are three forces here, and they all point the same direction. First, the market does not trade on how good things are. It trades on whether things are getting better or worse than what was already priced in. And these stocks had priced in perfection. When a stock has already tripled on the AI story, record profits isn't a surprise. It's the bare minimum required to justify where the price already is. The analysts at Forrester nailed it. The sell-off, one of them said, is less about weakening AI demand and more about a repricing of expectations after an exceptionally strong rally. In plain English, the news was great, but the price had already assumed great, so great wasn't good enough. That's the brutal logic of a hot trade. You can be firing on every cylinder and still fall, because firing on every cylinder was the assumption baked into the price months ago. Second, and more worrying, the fear isn't about today's demand. It's about who else is about to make this stuff. Reporting from Yahoo and Reuters flagged two specific anxieties. One is competition from China. A Chinese memory maker called CXMT had a blockbuster stock debut in Shanghai, and its rapid expansion raised fears it could flood the market and crush memory prices down the road. The other is a phrase you should file away: circular financing. That's the growing worry that a lot of the AI boom's money is going in circles. Chipmakers, cloud companies, and AI startups increasingly investing in and buying from each other in ways that can inflate the apparent demand. When NVIDIA is reportedly in talks to backstop hundreds of billions in funding tied to an OpenAI data center project, and does a massive strategic deal with SK Group in the same week, smart investors start asking an uncomfortable question. Is all this demand truly independent, or is some of it the same dollar being counted 3 times as it goes around the circle? And third, the simplest and maybe the most honest explanation, the memory shortage may still be completely real. But the market's patience for paying up for it is not. That's a line from Yahoo's Jared Blickery, and it's the crux. A shortage that lasts through 2027 is genuinely bullish for these businesses. But if you already paid 3 years of good news up front, you've got nothing left to buy. The story can be true, and the stock can still be finished going up, because the price already contains the story. So here's my take, and it's the through line for this whole episode. This is what the top of a boom actually feels like from the inside, and it's counterintuitive, so pay attention. It does not feel like collapse. There's no crash in demand, no empty order books, no bankruptcies. On the contrary, the fundamentals look spectacular. Record profits, sold out for years. That is exactly what makes it dangerous. The turn doesn't come when the news gets bad. It comes when the news is still great, but can't get any greater than what you already paid for. The most treacherous moment in any bubble isn't when things look terrible. It's when things look perfect, and the stock stops going up anyway. And I'd argue respectfully, that's a signal worth more of your attention than any earnings beat. When sold out through 2027 and down 30% are both true at the same time, the market is trying to tell you something. The question I'll leave you with, are these companies still winning, or have they just already been paid in advance for winning? Now, from the strange psychology of markets to something that genuinely reordered a rule I thought was settled. Let me tell you about scientists making one of the weirdest phenomena in physics, using nothing but the sun. The phenomenon is quantum entanglement. If you've heard Einstein's phrase, spooky action at a distance, this is it. You take 2 particles, link them in a quantum sense, and from then on, measuring one instantly tells you about the other, no matter how far apart they are. It's not science fiction. It's the foundation of the emerging quantum world. Quantum computing, unbreakable quantum encryption, ultra-precise sensing. It's real. It's being built into technology right now, and here's the catch that has always come with it. To create entangled photons, you needed a laser. A very expensive, very precise, very power-hungry laser, producing perfectly orderly, coherent light. That was treated as a hard requirement. You cannot, the thinking went, make something as delicately ordered as quantum entanglement out of messy, chaotic light. Well, a team from the University of Ottawa and the Max Planck Institute for the Science of Light just did exactly that, with sunlight. Outdoor, ordinary sunlight. In a study published in the journal Optica on August 6th, they produced entangled photon pairs using the sun as the power source. No laser involved. And they didn't just claim it, they proved it by passing what's called a Bell inequality test, which is the gold standard check that confirms entanglement is genuinely quantum and not some classical trick. They cleared it with a fidelity around 94%, meaning the entangled state they made was about 94% of the way to a theoretically perfect one. That is a real, high-quality result. Now, let me explain why this is a bigger deal than it might sound, because the why it works is beautiful. Sunlight is, in physics terms, a disaster. It's spread out in every direction, it's every color mixed together, and it's temporally chaotic. None of the neat marching in lockstep quality a laser has. The entire assumption was that you needed that laser-like order to coax photons into entangling. What this team showed is that the order isn't actually required. They engineered their setup using a special crystal and a process called spontaneous parametric down conversion, so that all the messiness of sunlight, the different colors, the different directions, didn't interfere with the one property they cared about, the photon's polarization. They found a way to let the chaos through while protecting the quantum link. And most striking of all, they found the efficiency was, once you account for bandwidth, on par with laser-based systems. Not a sad little proof of concept. Competitive. Now, you know I don't hand you the wonder without the fine print. So here it is. Honestly, this is early stage. Nobody is running a quantum computer off a sunroof tomorrow. It was a controlled experiment, and turning it into deployed hardware is a long road with real obstacles. And I'll flag a small media hygiene point. Some outlets reported this appeared in a different journal. It's Optica, that's the primary source. And I'd trust that over the secondhand write-ups. But here's why I think this one genuinely matters, beyond being a cool trick. One of the great unspoken problems with the entire quantum computing dream is energy. These systems are absurdly power-hungry. They need ultra-cold temperatures and these big coherent lasers. And as you try to scale them up, the energy cost balloons into a real barrier. What this research points at is a future where you skip a whole step. You don't convert electricity into laser light to then make quantum states. You drive the quantum process directly with sunlight. Less energy, less heat, fewer components to break. And one of the researchers, Hania Fatahi, pointed to the most compelling use case: space. Sunlight is abundant and free in orbit. Imagine a satellite generating quantum-encrypted communication keys using nothing but the sunlight already hitting it. No heavy laser system, no massive power draw. In the Arctic, on a deep space probe. That's not a gimmick. That's an enabling technology. My take? This is the opposite kind of story from the chip stocks. And that's why I paired them. The chip market is full of dazzling numbers that might mean less than they appear. This is a quiet lab result that might mean far more than it appears. It won't move a stock today. It doesn't have a trillion-dollar headline. But you don't actually need the expensive, power-hungry thing everyone assumed you needed is the kind of sentence that years later turns out to have quietly changed the trajectory of a whole field. The best science often looks small on the day it's announced. All right. Let me bring it back to Earth, and to your local movie theater, because the third story is about a different kind of all-or-nothing bet. Brand new day, just crossed $1 billion in worldwide ticket sales. It's the second weekend of the Sony and Marvel film. It pulled in something like $150 to $160 million domestically in that frame alone, and it's now on track, according to Box Office Pro, to finish as the highest-grossing film of the entire year. $1 billion. In a post-pandemic era when people kept asking whether the theatrical blockbuster was dying, Spider-Man just emphatically said no. And I want to give credit where it's due, because it's real. This is a genuine triumph for movie theaters, which have had a brutal few years, and for the argument that the big screen communal experience still means something. When $1 billion flows in, thousands of theater employees keep their jobs, and the whole exhibition industry exhales. That's not nothing. That's a lot of livelihoods. But here's the critical layer, the part underneath the celebration. Listen to what Disney's CEO Josh D'Amaro actually said about it. He said the success of Spider-Man bodes well for the upcoming Avengers Doomsday, and industry watchers are already buzzing about something they've nicknamed Doomsday. December 18th. When Avengers Doomsday and Dune Part 3 are set to open on the same day, a frame some are predicting could bring in $500 or $600 million in a single weekend. Do you hear what's happening in that language? Every conversation about this billion-dollar success immediately becomes a conversation about the next franchise tentpole, and the one after that. Spider-Man, then Avengers, then Dune. Then, as one report noted, back to Avengers and Dune sequels. And that's the thing I gently push on, even in a good news story. Hollywood has increasingly bet its entire existence on a tiny handful of enormous, pre-existing franchises. Look at this year's #1 films. It reads like a list of sequels, reboots, and comic book properties. Avatar, Spider-Man, Avengers, Dune. A new Mario movie, Scream 7. The industry has become extraordinarily good at hitting the billion-dollar note on the properties audiences already know, and arguably increasingly dependent on doing so, because the mid-budget original film, the movie that isn't part 6 of anything, keeps getting squeezed out. When your whole business model rests on a few dozen brand names, a billion-dollar Spider-Man isn't just a win, it's a sign of how narrow the road has gotten. You're not building a diverse ecosystem of films, you're building a handful of enormous bets, and praying each one lands. Because if one of these tent poles ever collapses, there's less and less underneath it to catch the fall. My take: enjoy the Spider-Man win. It's real, it's good for a struggling industry, and there's genuine craft in making a billion-dollar crowd pleaser. Because it's the same one from our first story. A market, whether it's chip stocks or movie studios, that concentrates everything into a few dazzling winners, looks incredibly healthy right up until you ask, what happens to everything that isn't one of the winners? The billion-dollar movie and the trillion-dollar chip trade share a spine, enormous concentrated bets that look like strength and hide a fragility underneath. So let me tie the three together. Memory chips sold out through 2027, and the stock still crashed because perfect wasn't good enough. Sunlight, quiet result that quietly broke a rule everyone thought was permanent. And Spider-Man, a billion-dollar triumph that's also a portrait of an industry betting everything on fewer and fewer horses. The thread running through all of them is the gap between how something looks and what it's actually worth. The chip numbers look triumphant, and the market says, beware. The physics result looks minor and might be historic. The movie looks like pure health and hints at real fragility. So here's what I'll leave you with tonight. Be suspicious of the dazzling number and patient with the quiet one. The record profit that everyone already priced in might be a warning. The lab experiment nobody's trading on might be the thing that matters in 10 years. The skill isn't reacting to how big a headline sounds. It's asking every time, and what is this actually worth once the excitement wears off? Because the market, the lab, and the box office all just reminded us on the same day that those are very different questions. Take care of each other, and I'll see you tomorrow.